As part of Ferrari Fridays, William Ross from the Exotic Car Marketplace will be discussing all things Ferrari and interviewing people that live and breathe the Ferrari brand. Topics range from road cars to racing, drivers to owners, as well as auctions, private sales, and trends in the collector market.
Welcome back to the Ferrari Marketplace podcast. I'm your host, William Ross. Thanks for listening. I really appreciate the support. I'd like to give a shout out to a few of our sponsors and supporters before we jump into things here. Want to give a shout out to the Exotic Car Marketplace for everything exotic cars from Ferrari, Porsche to Lamborghini and Koenigsegg. Check out exoticcarmarketplace.com for all your exotic car needs before, after, and during ownership. The Motoring Podcast Network. Check out the family of automotive podcasts at motoringpodcast.net. If you're into anything with wheels and a motor, this is the site to check out. Check out slotmods.com. Let your imagination run wild what they could build for you in these outrageous and beautiful and minutely detailed slot car tracks. And finally, the Grand Touring Motorsports, covering all aspects of auto racing. And be sure to check out the monthly e-zine at gtmotorsports.org. All the links are posted up in the description. And I also like to kind of give a heads up to everyone. Our second annual Rockin' Revs Automotive Festival happening here in Fairview Park, Ohio on July 27th. This event is put together to help raise money for two near and dear things to my heart. One is ACBC, known as Aluminum Cans for Burn Children, who raise money to support pediatric burn survivors and send them some camps a couple times a year and anything that may require at their home, but also the Island Safe Harbor Animal Sanctuary in Marblehead, Ohio. To Nancy and her team up there that take in all the older dogs and dogs with medical needs and whatnot that are usually very difficult to kind of get adopted out. They tackle them head on and give these beautiful, beautiful animals a nice, warm place to stay and live to hopefully get adopted out, but if not, she keeps them. So anyways, on to our topic. Month of March is Women's History Month. So what we're going to delve into, Laura Ferrari. Yes, Enzo's wife. The enigmatic lady behind the man that created probably the most famous car brand known to man. A lot of this stuff is going to come from just what you can find in what you read, which is not a lot. And if you kind of reference the Michael Mann movie from a few years ago, you know, a lot of the stuff they try to do for Penelope Cruz to portray her, they had a very, very difficult time trying to get the truth, get the story, get the history, kind of get anything on her, because I would say very close to the vest, but there really wasn't much written about her. Back then was such a different time. You're talking the early 1900s all the way up to the 1970s when she passed, especially in Italy and Italian heritage. Who my producer, Eric, should be familiar with, is back then it was very, very different times in regards to having a wife, a mistress, girlfriend, what have you. It was common, and it was not, I won't say frowned upon maybe, but kind of just, all right, it's accepted. Very different times and very different way things were done. But again, also back then, women were never viewed as equal to men, which is a sad, sad situation, but it was just how things were done and how people were brought up. In this day and age, we still have a long way to go. But back then, it was horrific. Some of the stuff here is just baffling to me. But anyways, we're going to talk about Laura. I'm going to give what I can give, what I've been able to dig up. This is just my viewpoint. Now, Enzo and Laura met 1920, 1921, somewhere around in that era. They supposedly met at a train station, but other hearsay, other stuff, no, she was actually a go-go dancer at a, I don't want to say discotheque, but, you know, nightclub, whatever you want to call it back then. And Enzo, dashing racing driver, racing Alfa Romeos, this kind of stuff. So, you know, he had that charisma, the genesis, whatever you want to call it. Allure, I guess you could say, you know, women get drawn to. So they had met, and again, either at the train station or whatnot, but they actually, I want to say had a whirlwind romance, but from my understanding, you know, they jumped into bed pretty quickly and started basically having, you know, obviously romantic relationship from the get-go. Again, back then, especially in Italy and how strong the Catholic faith is in that country, having sex before marriage was a big no-no. They always wanted, oh, you marry a virgin, that kind of stupid shit. So they kind of kept hush-hush. But what was interesting, for image-wise, Enzo referred to her very early in the relationship as Laura Ferrari, as his wife, basically, because the circles he was going in, and again, this is just that weird dynamic and the way things were done back then. Him being a single guy and whatnot with a girlfriend was not viewed very good. they kind of, I don't say shun their nose at her, or whatever, but that they, I don't know if it was immaturity or whatnot, or just weird because, this is someone in their early 20s. This day and age, you look at someone that's married in the early 20s, like, what the hell's wrong with you? Did you marry a high school sweetheart? I mean, you don't get married that young, that early, so frequently anymore. It's just not as common. But back then, got married at 18, 19, you bam, right out of thing. And I think that had to do with the fact is, you married the first girl and you had at it. But anyways, he came out of the gate pretty early within the first year or something like that, and correspondence and everything like that was stating the fact of referring to her as Laura Ferrari, as his wife. So he would be received more favorably. Being a racing car driver, obviously, you're running around people with money, royalty, with clout. Obviously, perception is key. So he wanted to be perceived, as a man that I have a wife, I'm a stable guy, I got a good head on my shoulders. So he started referring to her that way. In the early relationship, everything hunky-dory, everything's good. Laura was a very outgoing person, very charismatic. From my understanding, from what I could see, she attended and went to all the races with them, everything like that. Even after they got married, she attended a lot of the races within the first year or two. But then after they got married, it kind of started waning. She started spending a lot more time. You want to say vacationing, but she was more on, a wellness situation, going up into the hills of the Italian Riviera and getting the better air, going to stay at her sister's and stuff like that. So you have a period of time in there after their marriage in the first few years where things started waning in regards to that relationship, partnership. And it got to the point where supposedly Enzo had sent her basically a letter that is either you come home or, we're done. So he just kind of got fed up with it. I think the image part of it might have been the situation, might have been as a problem. He's married, but okay, well, where's your wife? Well, she's hundreds of miles away in the Riviera, this and that. And in this time that this is happening, his company's going to shit. And him trying to build what he was trying to build wasn't coming together, just wasn't working out, his racing career, everything like that. He was a good racer, that's for sure, but gave her an ultimatum. So all of a sudden she comes back, and she comes back to a situation where everything's kind of the finances and stuff are all kind of in disarray. And as we all know Enzo's story, then he goes on to start looking over the Alfa Romeo race team to snap. But again, Laura's nowhere to be found. She doesn't come to races. She comes to a few here and there. She was in the one photo of Scuderia Ferrari's first victory and that stuff. So she was in that photo. So she still traveled a bit, but just not quite as frequently as she used to in the past. Now, this is when, after 12 years of marriage and all these turbulent times or anything like that, they have a son, Dino, Alfredo. So we all know Dino died at a very young age, and basically it was from muscular dystrophy, Duchenne muscular dystrophy, I guess you get more specific. And the one thing about it is Enzo found out, or back at the time, and I don't know, I'm not a doctor, so I don't know how true this is or whatnot, but this is passed on to a child from a chromosome from the mother. So Enzo basically blamed her for Dino's death so many years later from this horrible disease. Obviously, things got that much more strenuous after the passing of Dino. But here's the one other side of this. Not long after them getting, well, not getting married, but I want to say in the early 30s, before Dino was born, Lena Lardi came into Enzo's life. So this is an interesting dynamic because, again, how I stated earlier was back then in that day, it wasn't, I don't want to say frowned on, maybe it was frowned on, but it was like, it was accepted that you had a wife, you had a mistress. Plain and simple. So, I guess this is how it was back then. Kept hush-hush. You really didn't know about Lena till many years later. But this is when Enzo started to have, I want to say, a double life. Spending time with her and splitting all his time. So, in all honesty, I don't know how he did it. It's not like this day and age where you got cell phones, all this kind of stuff, and all this guys. You're talking about a time when you had to drive and all this stuff, and it's unbelievable how he did it. But anyways, we're jumping, not doing the early stuff. We're going to get into the meat of stuff in regards to where Laura's story is more prominent in the history of Ferrari. Ferrari's up and going by the time Dino's 24 when he passes. Ferrari itself is embedded in the racing world, and they're starting to make their production road cars to support the racing. Getting into this fact is, well, after Dino passes, there's always this headbutton. Laura, after a bit of mourning, everything like that, all of a sudden she becomes very, very involved with the running of Ferrari. she gets into more of the financial side of things, looking at the books, looking at expenses, everything like that. And all of a sudden, she starts going to all the races. Now, mind you, Enzo, as he got into things, he stopped going to races. Unless it was in Italy, within a few hours or what have you, he would go. But anything outside of that, he would get phone calls from the team managers. They would pass along the results, the information to him through telephone, telegraph, what have you. But Laura would go, and this is where this kind of becomes an odd situation. Is she reporting back to him, whatnot? People don't know, but she's all of a sudden going things. You see her in photos, everything like that, but she's more prominent within the running of Ferrari itself. And looking over the finances to be sure dollars aren't getting spent where they're supposed to, that kind of thing, which needs to be done. You can't just run haphazardly and stay in business. So that side of it, I think her taking that over, I think is brilliant, because I think it actually, to an extent, saved Ferrari from probably going under and going bankrupt or broke in the early years, where they would never even gotten to the point where Fiat would have came in and saved them, or all that stuff, playing that little game with Ford and everything like that. So I think that's kind of a very, very, I don't say underrated. I don't think people talk about it enough as saying, this woman came in and started going over the books, started minding expenses, started going to the races and stuff like that, and watching what people were doing in regards to what money they were spending, what expenditures, like every dollar counts. So I think that was a very, I don't want to say brilliant move, but I think it was a very pragmatic move in regards to the history of Ferrari and keeping the doors open and getting to where they are today. At this point in time, by some things that are happening, Enzo's got his girlfriend, Lena. Piero's born. We'll get into that a little bit more with how Laura handled that. And again, it's just a weird dynamic. And the times back then were completely different and how the thoughts were. And you don't know how someone was thinking. Can't get in someone's brain. But in 1961, they had the Palace Revolt, because there's all these engineers and managers were getting upset and pissed off. They felt, and again, this is probably the male ego involved, saying a woman shouldn't be on the floor, a woman shouldn't be telling us what to do, this and that. Because she was getting into everything, coming on the floor, getting anything, and probably minding the P's and Q's of the finances, trying to find out what's going on. And hey, my husband owns a company. I own the company too as well. Then you listen to what I do. And headstrong Italian men probably didn't take kindly to that. So they basically, through a lawyer, they go to Enzo and say, she's got to go. It's either her or us. Well, guess what? They went, which there were some very, very prominent people that left the company on that day. But then it also elevated Ferrari because of Ferrari came on board, was there, and very young, was early 20s, and he gets elevated to the team manager, all this stuff, and everything happened. It seemed, hey, it all worked out, obviously. Enzo backed us, and he kicked them out. So even though all those problems were there, that headbutting, everything like that, he still stood by, and I'm supporting my wife, which was awesome to see. So everyone leaves. So there's a big swift times change, whatnot. They had the next couple years in the racing department, and that did not go very well because, I don't want to say starting from scratch, but basically it is because you have that core that's working on everything. They all leave. Well, okay, you got to start over. So for the next 2 seasons, they didn't do too good. Obviously, they came roaring back. We know what happened after that. They just dominated F1. They dominated endurance racing, everything under the sun. Taking lemons, making lemonade, I guess you say. So that was kind of an interesting little dynamic, even though, and I don't want to say animosity, but I want to say, just the friction between Enzo and Laura going on. He still stood behind her. And up until 1970 in Italy, you couldn't get divorced anyways because the Catholic Church wouldn't allow it, because you had to go to the church to get permission to get divorced. So unless there was some really strenuous circumstances that would justify it, you weren't getting divorced back then. It wasn't happening. And I guess maybe that goes back to things, hey, you could have a mistress, whatnot, but hey, you kept the family together, everything like that. So in this time, then all of a sudden, Laura finds out about Lena Lardi, Enzo's mistress, and Piero. Watching the Ferrari movie, you probably saw all this stuff about her hunting her down or anything. Now, a lot of that's relatively true in regards to her laying down the law and finding out. But one of the big things that came out of that says, Piero will not take your last name, Enzo, until after I'm dead. He was always Piero. Now, in the movie, they say it's how it's true because Lena Lardi, she kept everything close to the chest and she wouldn't divulge much. And kudos to her. Hey, it's no one's business. It's her business between her and Enzo. But after, obviously, Laura died in 1978, Piero took the last name Ferrari, and there you go, as Enzo's only surviving son, who's still alive today, and he's got his own kids, and one of them is named Enzo, I think, going to school in California, something like that. So the legacy lives on, and I think he owns 5%, 10% of the... he's got a nice chunk of it where, he's obviously having that last name. He's enjoying life. All this is going on, and Lena does not live all that far. She lives in Modena, and the fact is she's not living all that far from where Laura and them are living, it's not like she's on the other side of the country or other side of the world or anything like that. Obviously, back then, you're not following someone on Instagram or Facebook, stalking them. Enzo put them up in a nice little house. Laura and them, they were living in this apartment. Again, it's something you try and wrap your head around now. It's just like, how is that possible? How can it's like, there's just no way. I mean, you hear stories and stuff all the time, and he had a second family, all this stuff. But back then, it was, that's his mistress. Oh, this and that. It was just basically, that's what that is. So anyways, she just put it to him after the fact, and she got involved with Ferrari, which I believe her involvement, I want to say, saved the company. Now, I know in the movie, they kind of said, she had half the shares, and then she needed to give some back to him, and she wanted $500,000, about the time frames were off and whatnot, and it's basically not true. Obviously, that's the thing for the story, for the movie, you got to build something up. That wasn't true, but she did have the ownership in the company, but having that half the shares and all this stuff and holding it over Enzo's head, as far as anyone knows and as far as I know what I could find, that wasn't true. She was a very prominent figure with Ferrari, and I honestly think her role in the story of Ferrari itself, the company, needs to be, I want to say, more prominent in regards to what her roles and what she did and how much she actually contributed to the company. Because again, I think when she stepped in, started doing the finances and everything like that wasn't Enzo's forte. His thing was corralling good people, getting them to do what he wanted them to do, and he was a leader, got the right people, put them in the right positions, and just cracked the whip, doing like that. Accounting wasn't his thing and doing the finance, but Laura, hey, she stepped in, and I honestly believe, I think she saved the company, kept it from going under, probably had a huge part in that. Yes, hey, he built great road cars for that, but you got to remember, they weren't building all that many cars back then. So it wasn't like they're cranking out tens of thousands of cars a year and say, we got all this money coming in. It was a tight thing, and the amount of race cars and racing they're doing, I mean, you got to go to shipping, all this kind of stuff. I mean, there's a lot of costs involved in that. So it's like, you got to get money for somewhere and whatnot, so you got to mind your P's and Q's. So I believe she needs to be recognized more in regards to the story of Ferrari itself, the company, and stepping in. And again, a lot of this stuff you read about is, I would say, hearsay, but it's from stories from other people. Everyone's, it's this or that. Some of the stuff you can figure out, like Laura and Enzo's mother, they didn't get along, but how common is that the daughter-in-law doesn't get along with their mother-in-law? And especially back then, because the hierarchy was and everything like that, your mother was God, so to speak. It's just commonplace. But you hear those stories, and I just think she's always been put in a negative light wrongly. What she put up with, what she had to deal with. Enzo was a difficult man, ego, whatnot. I mean, just for what she had to do and what she had to tolerate, a mistress having Enzo's love child and that kind of situation. Being accepted or whatnot back then, still, it doesn't matter. I mean, it's a slap in the face in regards to your wife. It's like, you don't respect me. But again, it's just such a different time back then. And then you're talking, a time it was in Italy that was old world, just different time. So I hope you appreciated my ramblings about Laura Ferrari. And like I said, celebrating Women's History Month here, I wanted to get out there and say, look, I think for her role and what she did and contributed to Ferrari is undervalued. And I think there needs to be more celebration in regards to how much she contributed to the company. I honestly believe she saved it from financial ruin when she finally started taking over the finances, getting involved more, going to the races, everything like that. I think she actually probably saved the company. So I think she needs to be celebrated a lot more in regards to the story of Ferrari to where it is today, because everything always lines up in place. You look at something that's getting close to 100 years old, as an entity lasting that long, you have your ups or downs, your peaks, your valleys, all these things happen. Hindsight, you can look and say, that happened, the Palace Revolt, but then this happened, which was successful for them. So it's like, look at the man upstairs, he's got a plan, that kind of stuff. Everything lined up, but certain things I think also happen that they don't get spoken about, or I don't think they get brought to more people's attention in regards to that. I just feel that she needs to be celebrated more in regards to the history and the story of Ferrari. That's all I want to say about that. Again, I appreciate you guys listening. Go check out Exotic Car Marketplace, FerrariMarketplace.com website. It's in the family of the Exotic Car Marketplace website. Check out motoringpodcast.net and check out your favorite automotive podcast. Be sure to go and check that out because there's a lot of cool stuff. Go through the archives. Definitely subscribe to all what you can because we're adding more and more podcasts as we speak, getting some new stuff on there to just expand what we can offer everyone so everyone's got something to listen to. I appreciate you listening. Celebrate Women's History Month. If your mom's still around, give her a big kiss, because without her, you wouldn't be here.
This episode has been brought to you by Grand Touring Motorsports as part of our Motoring Podcast Network. For more episodes like this, tune in each week for more exciting and educational content from organizations like the Exotic Car Marketplace, the Motoring Historian, Break Fix, and many others. If you'd like to support Grand Touring Motorsports and the Motoring Podcast Network, sign up for one of our many sponsorship tiers at www.patreon.com/GT Motorsports. Please note that the content, opinions, and materials presented and expressed in this episode are those of its creator, and this episode has been published with their consent. If you have any inquiries about this program, please contact the creators of this episode via email or social media as mentioned in the episode.